We're nearing the home stretch of the fantasy football regular season where the true contenders can begin jockeying for position to get into the fantasy football playoffs and ultimately become king or queen of your fantasy world. I'm John Macri, and for this episode of the PFF Fantasy Podcast IDP edition, I'll be going game by game, breaking down all of the relevant IDP information heading into week 9. So let's get it. All right, week 9. This really is the point of the season where I think the herd starts to thin, in my experience at least, right? The teams that aren't doing so well kind of start to pack it in for the year. They stop paying attention, kind of fade into the distance. And it happens every single year. It really can't be helped because not everyone can win, right? And I know we made the Expedition 33 reference last week, but the gomage is real for the fantasy football world, and we'll start to see that in the amount of people who can stay locked in here and those that fall off each and every week through the second half of the season. And obviously, you find folks who are tuned in right now. You are the strong, the survivors, and the championship contenders, right? So I'll do my best to get you right and ready for this week and the rest of the way as usual. And since you are here, if you'd be so kind to, as usual, like the channel, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hype the channel on the YouTube mobile app, all that stuff that really supports the show. And I greatly appreciate it. And if you do want to get access to my content over at pff.com, you can use the promo code PFF Fantasy Podcast 25 to get 25% off a PFF Plus subscription. That'll get you access to the IDP rankings, IDP fantasy reports, player grades, all that stuff. You'll get access to with that subscription all year long and into draft time, all that kind of stuff. So be sure to do that. And we'll get right into the week 9 games. I'll include the timestamps in the episode description as usual as well. But let's start with Monday Night Football, or no, Thursday. Yeah, usually the week of football starts on Thursday. Thursday Night Football, Miami Dolphins, Baltimore Ravens. So let's start with Miami's linebackers. Really not too much to go into here. Like, we're going to continue trusting the Miami linebacker duo here of Brooks and Dodson. They really have been amazing, apart from the blowout last week, which was in their favor, surprisingly. That basically meant that Brooks and Dodson didn't play for most of the fourth quarter last week. We're not expecting that to happen much this year, or arguably ever again with Miami having such a clear lead. So not a concern going forward for Tyrell Dodson and Jordan Brooks not playing full-time roles. We'll start them as usual, including this week against the Ravens. Miami's defensive line. So Jalen Phillips, he continues to look really good out there. He's just not getting the sack production to match kind of his underlying metrics. He's been a name mentioned in trade rumors quite a bit, which it makes sense for Miami considering that they have like an underutilized Chop Robinson kind of just sitting on the shelf collecting dust at the moment. So if Phillips stays healthy and like takes those pass rush metrics to another team, a contender even, maybe we start to see that translate to IDP production. Who knows? But for now, at least, he is the best pass rusher on the Dolphins for IDP purposes. Remains a potential streaming option if needed because Lamar Jackson is back this week, and so is his second highest pressure to sack conversion rate in the league. So that could be beneficial for Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Zach Sealer as well. Specifically, those are your kind of top IDP options here in Miami. And then Miami's defensive back. So Minkah Fitzpatrick, he got banged up last game. So did Ashton Davis. So if you're in a very desperate spot, then Ifeatu Melifonwu should get some run, but it's a below average tackle matchup for the safeties, especially for the cornerback. So we're not really going to be overly excited about starting any Miami defensive backs here on Thursday Night Football. For Baltimore, we'll start with their linebackers because Roquan Smith, obviously, he returned to the lineup last week, had himself a Roquan day, which was nice to see. Nothing really new here. He'll continue to be a weekly starter for us. However, there was at least a subtle change coming out of the Ravens bye week. They ran 3 safeties for the large majority of that week 8 game. So that basically resulted in Teddy Buchanan playing just 70% of the snaps after he was up around 90%, even higher than that last time Roquan was in the lineup. So Teddy Buchanan gets a little bit of a downgrade in value. Trenton Simpson basically didn't see the field, just 16% of snaps for him, and only on passing downs, but not all the passing downs. So yeah, obviously 3 safeties will help more in that situation. So yeah, Teddy Buchanan, just a deep league option for now. Trenton Simpson, just not worth putting into lineups again. Baltimore's defensive back. So yeah, the 3 safeties were, of course, Kyle Hamilton at 100% of snaps, 29% in the box, 30% on the defensive line, and 38% in the slot. And here's the best part, because he played 0% at deep safety. That is the good stuff right there, right? So yeah, Kyle Hamilton locked in. We love to see that. Alohi Gilman actually played slightly more than Malachi Starks, not enough to say that there's any real value gap between them. Starks is still startable if you need him. And all this does is add Alohi Gilman as a playable character basically as well. And Miami, for what it's worth, just an average safety tackle matchup. So spreading those tackles out across 3 full-time safeties isn't ideal. So Kyle Hamilton really kind of the prime option here. The rest are kind of in case of emergency. And then Baltimore's defensive line, Mike Green got his first NFL sack last week. That was great to finally see him. His playing time has been excellent. As we keep saying, that the problem has been kind of his underlying pass rush metrics. Those point to him just being really a volume dependent option only for now. Now, the nice thing is he's got a matchup here against Tua Tagovailoa and that Miami offensive line. So he could have some streaming value if you're desperate. Kyle Van Noy, again, also if you're desperate. And then Travis Jones, kind of the same in that DT required formats, but that's it there for the Ravens defensive line. Okay, before we go on to the Sunday slate, I want to let you all know that this episode is brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. Parenting is filled with high-pressure decisions, and it can be difficult to tell if we've made the right choice for our kids' future. But here's a simple decision you can make today that could have a meaningful impact on your kids' future: opening a UGMA kids investment account with Fabric to start their investment journey and give them a financial head start. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. It's all online, and setting up an account can take you just 5 minutes. Get started investing with as little as $1 a day, then manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. There are no contribution limits, multiple tax advantages, and they're SIPC insured up to $500,000, plus no commission fees, just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. Fabric has partnered with Gerber Life, trusted by millions of families like yours for over 50 years. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors, Inc. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, so we'll start on the Sunday games now. San Francisco 49ers, New York Giants. We'll go there first, and we'll start with the linebackers for San Francisco, because another week, another 49ers injured player, because now it seems like D. Winters could at least be in danger of missing this week. I know they called him day to day, so we'll see what the practice reports look like. I'm recording this on Wednesday. Wednesday practice reports aren't very reliable. We'll really lean into the Thursday, Friday reports for D. Winters specifically. But if D. Winters can't go, that puts Curtis Robinson in play as a potential fill-in. So Robinson played 100% of the snaps when Winters was out of the game last week. Not sure if he'll be a 100% snap player across a full game, but he is at least a waiver wire option for those in need. Tatum Bethune, meanwhile, continues, his Giga Chad ways as the Fred Warner fill-in. Another high-end tackle game from him this week. He's up to like an 18.6% tackle rate on the year. That is only behind Jordan Brooks at 18.7% among linebackers with 150 snaps at least. So he's been awesome. He's a top starter in a great matchup. Now, unfortunately, he won't be facing his Giga Chad counterpart on the other side of the ball, being Cam Skadabu. But the Giants' offense, it should still remain pretty tackle friendly to the linebacker position here. So, like Tatum Bethune, like D. Winters if he's playing. Otherwise, Curtis Robinson, worth a dart throw if you're in a tough spot and Sweet D can't go. Okay, 49ers defensive backs. It seems like they might have stopped with the safety shenanigans because Malik Mustafa finally got up to 100% of snaps. And as a result, he put together a nice 12 tackle game. So it was Mustafa and Jair Brown who played 100%. So they'll be the IDP options for us this week. But it's Mustafa who is the better IDP option, at least in my opinion. We'll see. He's just doing more with his opportunities, even though, both guys are getting decent usage in the box. I think last week Brown was at 44%, Mustafa at 38%. Both of them really are playable, but if I have to choose one, it would be Mustafa. San Francisco's defensive line. I mean, yeah, they're the team to make a move for Jalen Phillips or Kayvon Thibodeau. I know they just traded for Keon White, which it's fine. But yeah, you know what? Maybe we don't want them to trade for Jalen Phillips, considering his injury history and how cursed that franchise has been right now. But we'll see what happens there. Not going to be starting Keon White in his first game with the team. We really just want to see what the playing time is going to be. Somebody hopefully emerges there. Maybe it's Michael Williams. Maybe it's Keon White. Maybe it's somebody else. Who knows? But yeah, for now, this isn't really a group worth targeting here. On the Giants, so their defensive line, yeah, speaking of like Kayvon Thibodeau, who has been, getting included in some trade rumors, the 49ers at least get a, close-up look at him this week. So maybe that helps. We'll see. But not really all that interested in Thibodeau for IDP right now. The snaps are fine. He's just not been all that effective on the year. Not like Brian Burns, obviously, who is tied for the league lead in sacks with Myles Garrett, who had 5 sacks last week. LOL. Yeah, Burns, he's had 5 sacks over the last 3 games combined, so he's been just excellent, and we're not benching him anytime soon. Abdul Carter, meanwhile, has been pretty good for a rookie. Last week, he actually played a season-high 83% of snaps. That was the most on the Giants defensive line. He had a nice 71.2 pass rush grade, 26% win rate, and 26% pressure rate. He's really kind of been great, like just overall. It just hasn't translated to IDP just yet. He might be a player that I'd be looking to potentially buy low in Dynasty if you can, right? Easier said than done. Say you're, maybe looking at a rebuild and a contender has Abdul Carter. Maybe you could swing a deal there to him. Like if you have some, maybe some overachievers from this year that you're not crazy about long term that you could swap for an Abdul Carter, worth a shot anyways. But yeah, like what I've been seeing from him, just obviously we're going to want that to start translating to IDP here in the near future. Giants linebackers, Bobby Okereke, solid option as usual. Darius Moaso, nothing more than, a deep league option. He played 81% of snaps last week, which is fine, but he managed like a 2% tackle rate. And he owns like an 8% tackle rate on the year. He is rubbish, mate. That's just not going to do it. So yeah, deep league option only for Darius Moaso. And then Giants defensive backs, Javon Holland missed last week's game. So we'll see what happens there again. If he does miss, then Dane Belton filled in as expected, and he was pretty solid. So he could be a nice option for us again, assuming Javon Holland misses. Tyler Nubin, he kind of continues to just be a little bit mid this year, right? But again, this is a really nice matchup for the safety position. So Tyler Nubin, Javon Holland, or Dane Belton could be nice streaming options here against the 49ers, who are giving up the 3rd most tackles to the safety position. Andrew Phillips, the cornerback there, we talked about him last week being kind of in a bad matchup because he was going against the Eagles, who weren't giving up a lot of tackles to the cornerback position, and they don't run a high rate of 11 personnel. So he ended up with just 2 tackles and a pass breakup on just 53% of snaps, though, right? So this week against the 49ers, it's really not that much better for Phillips. They're also a below average tackle matchup for corners, and they play a well below average rate of 11 personnel. So like less than 50% low. So it's another week to maybe either temper expectations or find a Phillips replacement for this week. All right, going to Atlanta and New England next. Atlanta's linebackers. We'll start here because as we kind of talked about last week, JD Bertrand, he was our fill-in option for Divine Diablo. We didn't know that El Diablo, which of course is Spanish for a fighting chicken, would land on injured reserve. So for at least 3 more games here, JD Bertrand should get some play. He played 99% of snaps in week 8. He hit double-digit tackles, so that was good to see. We'll see if the team keeps deploying him in a full-time role. Obviously, not the best linebacker out there if you've seen the PFF grades for him. And also some of the coaches' comments about him as well. So that's where the risk comes in. But again, Diablo's out for another 3 games here. They don't really have any other options. So it might be Bertrand once again. I know I've got him in a few spots and fine starting him if needed. It is a neutral matchup for him as far as tackles go, and Caden Ellis at linebacker, obviously. But maybe Ellis gets a sack against Drizzy Drake May, because we know it isn't likely coming from that Atlanta defensive line, right? So speaking of that Atlanta defensive line, I know Myles Garrett got 5 sacks against Drake May of the Patriots by himself last week. But the bad news, I guess, is that all of the Falcons defensive line combined do not equal 1 Myles Garrett, unfortunately. So we're not going to have much hope for these guys to do much. James Pierce Jr., their rookie first-round pick, he's at least getting a decent snap share. He played 71% of snaps this past week. Just didn't do much with the opportunity IDP-wise. But again, we at least have higher hopes for him long-term, especially over some of these other guys like the 79-year-old Leonard Floyd and Arnold Ebiketie and D'Angelo Malone, who were basically just out there picking dandelions with their snaps. 0% win rate, 0% pressure rate for both of those guys. It's a rough crop of defensive linemen to choose from in Atlanta right now, basically, is what I'm trying to say. We'll see if James Pierce and Jalen Walker, when healthy, turn into anything. But, man, not a good group for IDP right now. Defensive backs for the Falcons. We talked about Jesse Bates last week playing 71% of his snaps in the box the week before. Didn't think it would be that high again, even though it would still likely be high. But I was kind of wrong because he played 76% of his snaps in the box this past week. The dude is basically a linebacker at this point. It's kind of crazy. I know he didn't have the best day for IDP. It was fine, but that's an insane rate of snaps to be up in the box for Jesse Bates. And he should be pretty effective with those opportunities if he keeps getting them, right? So, Jesse Bates, Xavier Watts, both solid IDP options at safety. Again, even though it isn't the best matchup this week, I still don't mind either one of those guys. And then last week, I also kind of joked that it would be Sweet D Alford to get a sack on Tua over anyone on that Atlanta defensive line. And well, Sweet D was the only one to get a sack on Tua last week, ironically enough. But now I like D Alford, but we also know that the team likes rookie Billy Bowman Jr. We'll see if Bowman is back this week. It could happen, which really kind of takes Alford out of play for the most part. The other thing too, even if Bowman isn't back, is that his usage is dependent on matchup, right? As that nickel corner. Last week, Alford played just 48% of snaps, which means he was pretty lucky to have salvaged his day with a sack. And the reason that he played so little was because Miami runs a very low rate of 11 personnel on offense, as does the New England Patriots, who are actually slightly lower than Miami. So we're not expecting a usable snap share for Sweet D or Billy Bowman this week, whoever happens to be the starting nickel corner this week. So just keep an eye out for that. For New England, we'll start with their linebackers. Last week, it was a nice week for Robert Spillane. We knew that coming into the week because of the matchup. This week, he's kind of back down to where he usually is on the lower end of full-time linebackers, which is fine. He's a 100% linebacker, certainly capable of popping off just with his tackle rate in a man-heavy defense. We have been kind of projecting him to come in with a little below average output for a full-time linebacker. And that's pretty much been what we've gotten from him most weeks. Christian Ellis, he did see his snap share increase to 72% last week, which was the highest that it's been for him since week 2. Whether that sticks or not is kind of anyone's guess, but it is at least worth monitoring this week since he does carry that D-line designation on sleeper. So could, still be a solid DL2 in a tackle-heavy scoring format if he's back to that clear LB2 and seeing north of 65% of snaps each week. New England's defensive line, rough matchup for this group, especially if Michael Penix is back in the lineup. Harold Landry, Caleb Von Chason, these are purely volume-based options. Same thing with Milton Williams and Christian Barmore at this point for DT required leagues. Like if we're starting them, we are literally hoping that they just fall into production because they just haven't really been earning it all year, basically. New England's defensive backs, we got some movement here. Kyle Duggar got traded. Now, that doesn't do anything for New England, so we'll save that for later, maybe when we talk about the Steelers. But Marcus Jones, he's been really solid this year to his credit. He got a 3-year extension as well. So that was nice to see. Now for IDP, this doesn't really change all that much. He's still the starting nickel corner for them. And we still worry a little bit about his fluctuating snap share. He played just 72% of snaps last week. Luckily, he's just been really efficient with his opportunities. So he had a nice game, but just know that production like that on unstable snap shares, it can be pretty fickle, right? And this week he gets the Falcons. The Falcons ranked 25th in 11 personnel rate. So again, might be more situations where he's off the field to just match personnel on defense. That being said, the coaching staff does trust him to kind of make plays, even if it is not the exact perfect matchup scenario for them. So he's getting a little bit more work than your average nickel corner in those situations, which is nice to see. And the Falcons are at least a positive tackle matchup to cornerback. So I'd be fine starting Marcus Jones. That was a lot of words to say you can start him. I'd like to provide some rationale for you guys and not just say start this guy, sit this guy. So hopefully you understand that and it was helpful. But Marcus Jones, good to go. The safeties, all right, Minnesota, Detroit next. Minnesota linebackers, let's start there because Blake Cashman draws the best tackle matchup for the position this week going against the Lions, who are giving up the most tackles per game to the linebacker position. Cashman had a nice game last week, 11 total tackles. So can he deliver again? I'm certainly hopeful here, as long as, he doesn't break during the game. That's the main thing with him. But good to go with Cashman. Eric Wilson, also a solid option as the LB2 there. More for deeper leagues since he's not full-time. He played 82% last week, but could definitely make an impact in a matchup like this one. So both guys are options here. Minnesota's defensive line, Jonathan Grenard had a really nice Thursday night game last week, was making tackles, landed a sack as well. It's not a perfect pass rush matchup against the Lions offensive line and Jared Goff, but it's a good tackle matchup for defensive linemen at the very least. So I'd be good starting Grenard once again this week if you have him. And again, we'll just continue to be on wait and see mode with the gangster, Andrew Van Ginkel. No idea if he'll be back this week or not, but I'm probably not starting him first game back, mostly with concern that he'll be eased back into the lineup since they're obviously like what's his face, Dallas Turner, right? So they've been playing Turner a ton with Andrew Van Ginkel out. Turner still isn't doing shit with those snaps, but maybe one day, right? Like he's still young. He's a young prospect, first round pick, all that kind of stuff. But we knew coming out of his NFL draft that he would take some time, and it's definitely taken some time. So Dallas Turner, just kind of a volume dependent option. And again, if Van Ginkel is active, I'll probably bench him for this week just to wait and see what his snap share looks like. Minnesota's defensive back. So Harrison Smith had a really nice week 8 game as well. We talked about him on last week's show, getting his starting job back from Theo Jackson. It was only about 83% of snaps this past week for Smith, but that could bounce back this week as well, back to 100%. But the main thing is that Theo Jackson is not in play right now. He played just 47% of snaps last week, so there's no way we should be trusting him this week. Josh Metellus, obviously still the alpha IDP there with the best usage and really the best projection for tackles rest of season from that group. And another decent matchup as well. Top 10 matchup for safety tackles here for Metellus and Harrison Smith. Going to Detroit, Hutch, coming off his bye week. I hope he was, well rested, relaxing on a beach somewhere, sipping pina coladas, surrounded by tons of bikini models, because That's what he deserves, damn it. And we just got the news that right before we started recording that he got a monster $45 million extension, also very well deserved. Personally, if I was his agent, I would have glazed him hard enough in the negotiations to get that extra 1.6 million to put him ahead of Micah Parsons. But that's just me. Maybe I'd be a better agent, Hutch. We'll find out. Give me a ring, brother. We could be best friends as well. Go to Red Wings games together in the off season. Just, hang out, and my commission would be significantly lower as well. So think about it. Is all I'm saying. Hutch, obviously, I'm very excited for his extension, and it definitely deserved. But hopefully a nice bye week for him, and hopefully comes back healthy, right, and refreshed, recharged, motivated to continue kind of wrecking shop as he has all year. Because JJ McCarthy is back at quarterback. Last we saw JJ McCarthy, he owned a 40.9 pressure to sack conversion rate, which is incredibly high, and definitely one that Hutch can take advantage of if that sticks. So something to keep an eye out there for how JJ McCarthy does, and maybe could be, again, a player to target for our pass rushers going forward. Detroit's linebackers, Jack Campbell, excellent all season. No reason to turn away from him right now. It's a below average matchup, so it's not ideal for the Prince of Asgard there, Alex Anzalone, but still a full-time linebacker. So again, it's not the worst he's not the worst option in the world. Derek Barnes also still playing over 90% of snaps and has that D-line eligibility on sleeper. This isn't necessarily the best matchup for him, since the Vikings are dead last in tackles per game to defensive linemen, which is really what Derek Barnes's deployment matches up to be. He won't fall under that linebacker category just because of where he's lining up on the field. And plus, we'll see if Malcolm Rodriguez returning affects Derek Barnes's playing time at all, because he's not likely going to affect anyone other than Barnes. But we'll see what happens there. Detroit's defensive backs. Brian Branch, he's coming back from suspension, which is nice. Kirby Joseph might be back from injury as well. Also nice, I guess. What isn't nice is that the Vikings are dead last in tackles per game to the safety position. So don't love that. We'll temper expectations for them. Probably still starting Branch unless you have like these amazing other options. But I can live with benching Kirby Joseph, for example, this week. Denver, Houston is next, starting with Denver's linebackers. Dre Greenlaw, another player returning from suspension this week, which means that Justin Sternad is going to go back down to being unusable for IDP. We'll see what Greenlaw's snaps look like this week, because he wasn't full-time in his first game back. There's a chance that he continues to kind of be eased back in, because he's another fragile one that I'm sure the Broncos would like to keep healthy for a potential playoff run. Just watching for Greenlaw. He's on the lower end of starting linebackers for me this week. Kingleton's snap share should still be safe at 100%. It is actually a great matchup for linebackers here. The Texans jumped up these rankings quite a bit after the 49ers linebackers put up a ton of tackles on them last week. So now they sit third in tackles per game to the position. You got to know Kingleton is licking his chops for some of that. And then, Greenlaw, again, more of a deeper league play this week, just because we don't know if he's going to bounce right back into that 100% snap role. He hasn't been there yet, but also he's only played one game. So we'll find out here this week. Denver's defensive line, Nick Bonito, he's cooled off a little bit over the last 2 games. Obviously, no sacks after getting 8 through the first 6 games of the season. We know that he has that explosive potential in him, though. The pass rush metrics really aren't all that different from where they were last year. So the Texans' offensive line, they were one to take advantage of. Now, I do want to point out, like, their pass blocking unit, it has been getting a little more effective over the past few weeks. And that is because they've started to utilize a 6th offensive lineman on the field. Last week, they played 25 snaps with 6 offensive linemen. That was by far the most on the week. I wonder that, since it was actually successful, if they keep going back to that to protect CJ Stroud, who is also really starting to improve in terms of pressure to sack conversion rate. 16.9% is so far the best mark of his 3-year career. So this might not be the best pass rush matchup as it has been over the last year and a bit, but this will at least definitely be the best test of that, with Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper, who continues to be really underrated, and Zach Allen in the middle. So all of those guys are startable. but I wouldn't be surprised if they're not kind of the high ceiling outputs that we've seen from them in the past, basically. And then Denver's defensive backs, nothing new with the safeties. You know who they are: Brandon Jones, Talanoa Hufanga. They've been solid. Riley Moss had another solid game last week, as we expected, and we continue to kind of trust him in CB required leagues. Patrick Surtain got hurt, which is why something called Chris Abrams Drain finished second on the team in tackles. It did help that they were facing the Cowboys, who give up the most tackles per game to the cornerback position. So Abrams Drain is going to probably fill in here for the next couple weeks with Surtain on the shelf. It doesn't sound like he's going to IR or anything. So just a short-term fill-in this week, just kind of a neutral matchup. Yeah, it could just be a filler option if you really need him. Going to Houston now. So we'll start with their defensive line because, look, Will Anderson continues to be solid. Got another sack this past week. He's taking advantage of the better matchups as well, as we talked about last week. And we also referenced Danielle Hunter drawing the tougher matchup last week against Trent Williams, and the week before that against Charles Cross as well, right? So hopefully it's got to get better for Danielle Hunter. Well, not so much, because this week for Hunter, he draws Garrett Bowles at left tackle, who happens to be the number one graded pass blocker at his position. And then obviously Bo Nix continues to do a really nice job not letting pressures turn into sacks. It doesn't mean that Danielle Hunter can't deliver, but for anyone wondering why he has been like quiet recently, and then potentially this week again, matchups do really matter a lot for pass rushers who aren't Myles Garrett, basically. Danielle Hunter, he has faced kind of a murderer's row of pass blockers over this 3-game stretch. He's basically going up like against the 3-phase boss fight with the toughest final form, like Safer Sephiroth here this week still to go. And unfortunately, he's lost every time. So it doesn't bode well for poor Danielle Hunter. He'll be fine once he gets better matchups, but man, it has been tough on him right now. So can't really blame him for not producing here recently, but I understand if IDP managers are going to look for maybe a better streaming option this week. Houston's linebackers, Azeez Al-Shaair is still the only full-time option, even though some weeks it doesn't feel like he's playing every snap because he's been really inefficient. But, he's still a better option than EJ Speed and Hanky Two Toes, because these two are still sharing the LB2 duties in Houston, with Speed playing mostly on passing downs and To'o playing on early downs. We'll continue to avoid those two until we see someone emerge there. For now, Azeez Al-Shaair, just kind of low end full-time player at the position right now. And then Jalen Petrie, he is still the top option here. He's getting the best usage. He's been the most productive of this Houston defensive back core here. So he'll be a starter for us, for most of us, really. And the rest are really only just deeper league options. Although Kamari Lassiter, should highlight him. He's been really productive in the last few games. And this is a nice matchup for cornerbacks. Denver giving up the 3rd most tackles per game to the cornerback position. So Kamari Lassiter, who has had double-digit tackles, and I want to say back-to-back games, should get a decent shot at returning that value again this week. Okay, Chargers and Tennessee Titans. Let's start with the defensive backs because we lost Derwin. Not sure for how long, but of course, just another one of our IDP stars getting banged up. Hopefully not for long, but for now, we're not going to rely on the other Chargers safeties because there's a decent chance that they rotate these guys, as they really have been doing all year outside of Derwin James. We also lost Tarheeb Still for a couple weeks. He's also been a solid CB required option for us. There's a chance that Jasir Taylor can deliver similarly for the time being, but I'd probably look elsewhere since this matchup is poor for cornerback tackles. Linebackers for the Chargers. Is anyone going to trust Ian Henley this week? It's going to be tough. Last week, he disappeared on us again. Now, to be fair to him, the team played, I think it was 49 defensive snaps, and there was garbage time. So he ended up playing like 38 snaps, which is super low. It's going to be hard to produce on, that many snaps for any player. That being said, the fact that it's happened 2 weeks in a row, And now he draws the 31st matchup for linebacker tackles. Yeah, I'd have a hard time plugging him in this week as well. I understand, with bye weeks and injuries, we might have to hope and pray with Henley here this week. So, good luck to us all who are in such an unfortunate situation. But yeah, hopefully he could bounce back beyond this week. But it's been rough for Diane Henley. And the LB2 situation, as we talked about last week as well, if Perriman and Troy Dye were active together, that it would be a shared role and not one where we're trusting these guys for IDP. That was the case. So again, especially this week in this poor matchup, no thanks on Denzel Perriman and Troy Dye. Chargers defensive line. So Khalil Mack's snap share grew last week. He landed a sack again. So good time for him to kind of get back to his normal snap share because he'll get the sack fetishist Cam Ward this week. So Khalil Mack and Tuli Tuipulotu should be solid options if you need/want to start them. Odafe Owe has played well since joining the team. The snap share is fine still, but I think there's probably room for Khalil Mack snaps to go up. And Owe snaps to maybe go a little bit lower. But last week, at least, that 3-man rotation, it did work well for them. So maybe Kamari Owe is working his way up the Final Fantasy X party member depth chart. Maybe he's Riku now, good for at least 2 moves, Steal and All Bed Potion. But could be an option this week if you're desperate. Oh, and Justin Aboigbe, defensive tackle for the Chargers. He had 2 sacks last week, getting some snaps here recently. He's averaging 64% of snaps over the last 3 games, I believe it is. He has 4 sacks on the year now, but really just kind of a volume dependent option for DT required leagues. Nothing amazing there underlying pass rush metrics wise to say we should expect a whole lot more from him. So it'll just really depend on your options, but nice, at least volume option. Okay, let's go to Tennessee now. They also have some IDPs as well, I guess. And we'll start with the linebackers. Cedric Gray. He's really kind of the most prominent of the bunch. It's not, wasn't the best IDP game from him last week, but he's still a significantly better IDP than Cody Wet-Farton. Nicer matchup for the Tennessee linebackers this week. Both of them are essentially every down players, so they can be fine. But yeah, I definitely prefer Gray over Barton. We know that. Tennessee's defensive line, I think there's a chance that Jeffrey Simmons returns this week. It would be nice. It would be a good time for him to return against the Chargers offensive line, who has struggled this season, mostly due to injuries. So if Simmons is back, then we could roll with him. If he's not back, then we basically punt this Tennessee defensive line into the sun. And Tennessee's defensive backs, man, another group of IDPs to just basically completely avoid on this team. They went from they went with like a very rotation heavy deployment at safety again this past week, where nobody played enough to I think trust this week. Even $5 Amani Hooker played just 74%. That led the group. So we're just going to avoid this group until someone eventually emerges as a full-time player. Hopefully it's the rookie Kevin Winston Jr., but we'll find out as the season goes on here. All right, Indianapolis and Pittsburgh is next. We'll start with the Indianapolis linebackers because we just talked about Diane Henley and what a disgraziad he's been for IDP. Well, I don't think there's been anyone as disappointing as Zaire Franklin this season. He has been an actual ghost out there, which is even more surprising when contrasted with like his previous seasons as a locked in LB1. Like last week, it was last week. I compared him to the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and the bastardization of a classic, and I thought maybe that was being too harsh. Well, after last week's game where he managed just 2 assisted tackles, I might not have been harsh enough. He is literally Red 13 moonwalking his goofy ass and dancing with that ridiculous child speaking voice. He is Chadley. He is deserving of being yeeted into the sun with these performances. And I'm sorry for anyone that doesn't understand those references. Trust me, you're better off not knowing. But yeah, he's been awful, an abomination. And then, the Colts are winning games as well pretty handedly. So a lot of weeks that they're resting their starters in garbage time, which just makes the situation even less ideal. So it's not great right now for Zaire. We'll see if he ever bounces back, but he might be toast for the rest of the season. He's an LB3 at best, right? And that's me trying to remain partial as someone who has to analyze this stuff. Okay, I am sure that you guys are pissed with his BS. So yeah, that's Zaire Franklin, man. Meanwhile, Jermaine Pratt, and hell, even Austin Ajiaki and even Buddy Johnson, they all played fewer snaps than Zaire Franklin last week. They all had more tackles. So go figure. But whatever, man. I'll stop talking about it now. Yeah, Jermaine Pratt, still a fine deep league option here. He's also not a full-time player, but should be pretty close, assuming there's no garbage time. The matchup is decent, right? The Steelers, they're top 10 in tackles per game to the linebacker position. So you know who is lubed up and ready to F up that average is Zaire Franklin, I'm sure. But hopefully not. And hopefully we can at least get that top 10 production for 1 week at least from Zaire and company. Indianapolis's defensive line. So Laiatu Latu, DeForest Buckner, they're still the top options here. Latu, he only had a half sack last week, unfortunately. He was also rested in garbage time. So most of the fourth half, whatever, or fourth quarter. But yeah, better than nothing, like some of his teammates, but still want to get him home a little bit more with sacks and deliver on those strong pass rush metrics. But yeah, really a streaming option is Latu. Buckner, he's not leaving those DT required lineups. We already know that. Indianapolis's defensive backs, Nick Cross, Cam Bynum, they were also rested in garbage time last week, so they weren't able to really fully capitalize on their usual snaps, and Cross especially playing like that 40% box snap rate. Not the best matchup for the safeties this week, unfortunately, so a chance it could be another down week, but I still like Cross a fair bit more than Cam Bynum. Kenny Moore, the cornerback, he's been great again this year. We'll see if he can keep it going in what has been the worst tackle matchup to the cornerback position. So, yeah. Pittsburgh's linebackers, we'll go over there now. The Steelers, yeah. Linebackers, it's... If anybody knows about disappointing tackle rates, talking about Zaire Franklin, I think the logical transition here is Patrick Queen, right? Who has been the queen of poor tackle efficiency. He's another one here that comes in well below average in terms of linebacker tackle efficiency, but we expect it from him, right? So nobody's got their pitchforks and torches going after Patrick Queen because he's just matching our expectations. That's what he does. So if Zaire Franklin just matches expectations, we won't be mad at you. But he's not even doing that. But still 100% of snaps for Mr. Queen. Meanwhile, we got a slight improvement for Peyton Wilson this past week. If you remember, we talked last week about Wilson getting utilized only on passing downs, Cole Holcomb on early downs. Well, in week 8, they gave Wilson more early downs, and rightfully so, which helped him improve to just a 67% snap share. Still not great, but at least an improvement from 43% the week before. We'll continue to monitor here because it's not like the Steelers have necessarily earned our trust to blindly expect the same thing every week, which makes me want to just kind of hold on Peyton Wilson for one more week just to be safe, especially in a below average matchup, really a poor matchup for tackles. Pittsburgh's defensive line. So it's still very clearly the same trio that we've been starting here for IDP: TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward. Nick Herbig played just 38% last week. Now, TJ Watt has been really kind of up and down this season. He had the slow start to the year. We had to reverse jinx him. It worked. I don't think he needs the reverse jinx again. I think he'll be fine, but I do want to point out that like his pass rush metrics through the first half of the year have been down on the as a whole compared to like his career norm, right? So 76.7 pass rush grade on the year for TJ Watt. That ranks 18th at the position. 26 total pressures is tied for 24th, tied with Nick Herbig, by the way. And then 14.4% win rate ranks 39th among edge defenders so far. Now, I'm not trying to say it's Gerber for Watt. I don't want that to be the takeaway here. I'm just pointing out something to keep an eye on at this point in his career. Like, he could easily bounce back as soon as this week, though not an easy matchup, and he could be elite for the rest of the year and turn all those numbers around because still lots of ball to play. But yeah, I've just been looking at some guys here at the halfway point in the season, and Watt at least stood out as one of those guys that's worth noting here for now. Pittsburgh's defensive back. So we lost another one. This time, the great Deshaun Elliott. He has been excellent for IDP. He's now done for the year because, of course, we can't have nice things. Now, what's interesting is that the Steelers traded for Kyle Duggar, which makes a lot of sense if they view him as the Elliott replacement because they do a lot of the same things well. And Duggar could really fit into this scheme as that safety to rotate down toward the line of scrimmage more often and rack up some strong IDP production once again. Now, we'll see what the snap share ends up being if Duggar is actually active for this game, which I'd expect he'd play, just not sure if it'll immediately be a 100% snap share. But if he gets to that point, then he'll be an IDP option for us once again. So we'll update this next week, and I'll try to remember to post the snap shares on the Twitter as well on Sunday. But just a name to monitor there right now is Kyle Duggar in Pittsburgh. Okay, Chicago, Cincinnati's next. Chicago's defensive line. Let's start here because Montez Sweat and Gervon Dexter have been solid enough to be in consideration for us. The playing time is right where we'd like it to be for both of these guys, and often really good for Montez Sweat specifically. Now, we know the Bengals offensive line is atrocious, but Joey Flax has been great at not letting that be his downfall. And he's taken just 4 sacks in 3 games with the Bengals, which, again, considering that O-line that's pretty damn impressive. So we'll see what the Sweaty Dex duo does here. Now, it's possible that Flacco also misses this game, which would bring in probably Jake Browning again. And that's a much better matchup for the Bears pass rushers. But just one to keep in mind here, both of those guys, Dexter and Sweat, are at least playable based on the matchup against the offensive line and their volume. Chicago's linebackers, Tremaine Edmonds finally came back down to earth last week, at least in terms of his tackle rate. It was bound to happen at least once, but we're not, going to waver in trusting him as a locked-in IDP option, considering his body of work this year. He's been really solid, so we'll continue to lock him into lineups. And then TJ Edwards as well, a good option in a neutral matchup here. Chicago's defensive back. So yeah, Kyler Gordon, another one now on IR. So, this dude just can't stay healthy. He's missed so much time in his career. Really kind of been a big letdown for IDP because there's potential with him. He just hasn't been able to showcase it consistently, right? They have been, they want to play him. That he was a perfect fit for the Dennis Allen defense. He just barely played this season. And now he's hurt again, right? So it sucks for him, and they haven't really been able to get the same potential or production from anyone else in that nickel spot so far. Maybe they trade for like a sweet D. Alford if Billy Bowman Jr. is back. I want to see someone be able to be utilized in this Dennis Allen defense, basically in that nickel spot, but we'll see. Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Byard, still solid options here. Okay, Cincinnati, really easy group of IDPs to go over. This will be quick. Start with their linebackers. Barrett Carter, still the LB1 there. Demetrius Knight, still the LB2. This has been consistent here since the Logan Wilson demotion. Both Carter and Knight are startable in most formats. Defensive line for the Bengals. Trey Hendrickson banged up again, still dealing with that hip injury. I wonder if a little tradesy might make him feel better. We'll see, but I'd like him with Washington. I think that'd be fun with Dan Quinn. They can definitely use the help, but a lot of teams can use Trey Hendrickson, so we'll see. And we're not trusting anybody else other than Hendrickson. Defensive backs for Cincinnati, Jordan Battle, Geno Stone continue to be solid weekly options, as is Dax Hill for CB required leagues. All right, on to Carolina and Green Bay. So we'll start with Carolina. Trevin Wallace, we'll start with their linebackers because he was taken out of the game last week to be evaluated for a concussion. He apparently cleared protocol. They ended up calling it a stinger, so he could be back this week and back in his usual green dot role. He actually had a decent game before getting hurt, mostly because he landed a sack, but 7 tackles as well. And would you believe me if I told you that was a season high for him? Well, it was, even if he didn't play the full game. So go figure. A nice matchup this week against the Packers, another top 10 team in linebacker tackles. So yeah, Trevin Wallace should be good to go. If not, Christian Roseboom would take over the full-time role, and Cloudon Sherrillis would take over the LB2 role, which would not be full-time, and he would just be more of a deep league option. Carolina's defensive back. So Trayvon Merrick has had more disappointing games than not recently. The usage hasn't really changed much for him. He's still getting ideal usage in the box and around the line of scrimmage. I'm still mostly fine with him and trust that he'll be okay. I mean, week 7, like he had 6 tackles and a sack, but obviously hasn't had those great games where he's pushing for double-digit tackles, at least since the first couple of weeks of the year. So we'll see if he bounces back, but possible that you have some other options that you might like right now. Carolina's defensive line, now Derek Brown is hurt, and A'Shawn Robinson is basically the last man standing as far as usable IDPs from Carolina's defensive line. So it's not good. But yeah, at least we do have a team where their defensive linemen are usable, because we'll talk about Green Bay next, and their defensive lineman, Micah Parsons, remains locked into lineups. We're not taking him out. Rashawn Gary has been really solid as well. He got 2 more sacks last week. Both Parsons and Gary ranked top 6 in the league in total sacks right now. Gary, yeah, he's kind of earned his spot in starting lineups at this point. It was also nice to see Devontae Wyatt bounce back last week. Or get back in the lineup and kind of bounce back a little bit. He played 54% of snaps. So kind of eased in a little bit coming off that knee injury from a couple weeks ago. Wasn't really all that effective, right? It was just good to see him out there and not a long-term injury, but should see a little snap increase this week, at least if he didn't suffer any setbacks. And that keeps him in play for DT required leagues if needed. Green Bay's linebackers, Coop and Quay and Coop, they draw a really nice matchup here for tackle potential, top 5 matchup. So they'll remain locked in for us. And then Green Bay's defensive backs, the mess of a DB situation right now. Xavier McKinney is really the only one that I trust right now. And even he hasn't been great, but he's at least playing 100% of snaps. And it is another top 5 tackle matchup for the position. Now, Evan Williams, for example, like he played just 78% of snaps last week. Then Javon Bullard also played just 78%, but we kind of expect that from Bullard since he's the nickel defender. But like Nate Hobbs, for example, who was at 100% in week 7, in week 8, he played just 4 snaps in the whole game. So yeah, I mean, not great. I guess Keyshawn Nixon at cornerback in a neutral matchup. I'm not sure he'll be returning kicks again, but he was at least full-time, just all on the outside. So blah. What's not blah is DraftKings. What's your favorite touchdown of all time? There's over 100 years of touchdowns to pick from. For me, it's the next one, because with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, every touchdown could bring you closer to cashing in. DraftKings Sportsbook delivers the unmatched intensity of the NFL right to your fingertips. From first touchdown score to anytime touchdown props or the thrill of live in-game betting, every snap is loaded with opportunity. Here's the best part. New customers bet just $5. If your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets instantly. We're using DraftKings odds this year at PFF, so if you're looking for best bets and edges to target on DraftKings, you can tune into the PFF betting show every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern on the PFF YouTube channel for great suggestions on what to consider when betting. But yeah, your team hitting pay dirt, that pays out to you. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code PFF. That's code PFF for new customers to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino Resort, Kansas. Pass-through of per wager tax may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Best bet must win to receive bonus bets which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer. Let's go on to Jacksonville and Las Vegas next. We'll start with Jacksonville's defensive line. So Josh Hines-Allen obviously has been nothing short of a disappointment right through the first half of the year. He is just DL 68 in IDP scoring right now. He's definitely playing enough. The pass rush metrics are strong enough to basically warrant more in the sack column. So I get IDP managers are frustrated by this. I'm frustrated by this. Coming out of the bye week here, there's obviously still plenty of season left. I figured he was kind of worth a temperature check. I wrote about him in the rankings article. He's still on the low end of edge 2 range for me in the rankings because he draws a good enough matchup to at least get back on track this week. He's going to face off against Raiders left tackle Stone Forsythe, who ranks just 57th at his position in pass blocking grade. And then he's got Geno Smith at quarterback, who owns a top 10 highest pressure to sack conversion rate on the year. So Heinz Allen, look, he's, I think, still a startable IDP. It's understandable if IDP managers want to take shots elsewhere at this point, but he's somebody that I think can still turn things around here in the second half of the season. I understand if you'd rather just wait with him on your bench until that happens. And then we'll see if Trayvon Wallace is back. Trayvon Walker. Yeah, see, I'm thinking about him as Barrett Wallace again with his little club arm there. But yeah, we'll see if he's back or not this week. But not starting him, I think, considering they limited his snaps so much. Last time we saw him, just 26% of snaps in week 7 before their bye. It was even lower the week before that as well. So Trayvon Walker has been the catalyst for his IDP production has just been playing time. If he's not getting that playing time, then he's not playable for IDP. Jacksonville linebackers. So Foye remains basically startable and a top option, just not a great matchup from a tackle perspective. It makes me a little more cautious on Devin Lloyd more than anything. If he's even able to go this week, Devin Lloyd's tackle rate hasn't been very good this season. He's been mostly big play dependent. So he'll be on the low end of full-time linebackers if he is able to go. If he's not, then Ventrell Miller should get some run again, and kind of same idea, low end option this week, only if you're in desperate need. And then Jacksonville's defensive back. So Jordan Lewis, he's cooled off a little bit here after a hot start, but a nice matchup for him as well to get back on track against the Raiders. They're giving up the 6th most tackles per game to the cornerback position. He's also the primary slot defender. So that'll help in a matchup like this where the Raiders rank 3rd in 11 personnel. So that'll keep him in position to make tackles around the line of scrimmage. And then Andrew Wingard remains, just like a fine fill-in option here at safety. Raiders, let's talk about them. We'll start with their linebackers. So Devin White is right now a top 10 IDP linebacker in scoring so far this season. It's been a nice revival for him this year in Las Vegas. The Raiders have helped him by being one of the most zone heavy defenses in the league and playing him for 100% of snaps. So it's kept White's tackle efficiency at least around league average. He has typically not been even league average. He's been one of the most ineffective tacklers at the position in recent years. So 13.6% tackle rate that this year, the average is 13%. So nice to see that from him. There's enough big plays there as well to put himself in the top 10 at the position. Now, this week, he does draw a poor matchup against the Jaguars. They're giving up just 14.4 tackles per game. And then you got a Landon Roberts out there as well, who's also playing over 90% of snaps. And he's been actually really efficient as a tackler, 16.1% tackle rate. So might not be as much to go around this week like we saw with this duo in week 7, right? Where they both had double-digit tackles, just monster games from the two of them. So I don't know that we see that this week from this duo, but they're both still startable because they're playing so much. Raiders defensive line. So Max Crosby, he is questionable still. Again, it's Wednesday. We'll see how things look Thursday, Friday, but he did leave that week 7 game banged up. So he had the bye week to recover. I think he'll be good to go. Also, it doesn't seem like the team is going to trade him, which isn't too much of a surprise. So not getting hopes up there or anything. If he is active this week, I'd play him because even a pitch count for Max Crosby is like 85% of snaps. So no concerns there if he's active. And Jonah Lalu too. I should talk about him because he's been like a top 12 defensive tackle in IDP scoring so far this year, mostly as a result of just kind of falling into 4 sacks through the first half of the year. And really the position itself has been underperforming for IDP. There have not been high-end scorers at the defensive tackle position. A lot of the guys that we thought were going to be good have really kind of disappointed or have been injured so far this season. So Lalu looks a lot better in his previous box scores than I think he really is. I'm not viewing him as anything more than kind of a volume dependent option in DT required leagues only, and really kind of a high likelihood of his production cooling down here in the second half of the year. He owns just a 55.5 pass rush grade that ranks 108th at the position. His overall PFF grade ranks 120th with a 47.4. So the snap share is good, but that could drop off at any point considering the poor play. I wouldn't be surprised to see him cool off just regardless through the rest of the year. Raiders defensive backs, really nice matchup for Jeremy Chin this week. Jaguars giving up the second most tackles per game to the safety position. So Chin has been a solid IDP for us, really strong usage around the line of scrimmage. So we could keep him in our IDP lineups. Otherwise, yeah, not all that interested in the rest of the Raiders DBs. Isaiah, pull them out if you're desperate. All right, New Orleans and the Los Angeles Rams are up next. Let's start with the Saints defensive line because Chase Young, he started the season late, not on time for him, but he's off to a nice hot start here. 2 sacks in his first 3 games of the year, 91.2 pass rush grade, and 11 total pressures. So those are really nice numbers on a small sample size. And look, just knowing the history of Chase Young, it's kind of hard to get too excited about him for IDP. But we talked about him a couple weeks ago in the waiver wire article as a waiver ad. Yeah, like he could be fine. He's going to get volume. And look, if those pass rush metrics are as good as or stay as good as they've been, then obviously we're going to trust them a lot more. But not an ideal matchup this week. He's going to face mostly left tackle Alaric Jackson, who has been, pretty solid. I think he's like 20th in pass blocking grade. But then mostly Matthew Stafford, who's doing a really great job not letting pressures turn into sacks. 12.1% pressure to sack conversion rate this year is a top 10 number. So Chase Young really kind of in that DL3 range for at least a little bit longer. It has that value in deeper formats, but not a lock for IDP lineups in shallower formats, basically. Saints linebackers, Demario Davis, still very clearly the only one worth rostering and starting at this point. Pete Werner's snaps continue to hover below 50%, which is unusable in the large majority of IDP leagues. This doesn't look like a Danny Stutzman takeover or anything for what it's worth. Like I know plenty of IDP dynasty managers are hoping that that's the case. Stutzman is getting some playing time, but it's not really enough to suggest that he'll overtake Werner here soon. Like maybe by the end of the year, we'll see, but doesn't look that way just yet. Stutzman, I think he played 24% of snaps in week 7, 14% in week 8, which was the same amount as Isaiah Stalbert, whoever that was. Okay, New Orleans defensive backs. I like this matchup for Alontae Taylor. Very friendly tackle matchup for cornerbacks. The Rams play a ton of 11 personnel, so like Alontae Taylor to get plenty of work this week. Stay busy. He's a top CB required option for me here in week 9. The safeties, Justin Reed, Jonas Sanker are fine. We did finally get Sanker at least one single more box snap than Reed this week, which was exciting. It was literally only one snap for him more than Reed in the box. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe that'll snap back to Reed this week, but it's at least something to keep an eye out for at the very least, because that usage wasn't particularly close in past weeks. So keeping a watchful eye here. Let's go to the Rams next. Let's start with their defensive backs because I love this matchup for Quentin Lake. He is a top 5 scorer at the position this season for IDP. Draws a really nice matchup to keep that going this week against the Saints because he is a slot corner for the Rams. So we're not looking at the safety tackle numbers given up by the Saints. We're looking at the cornerback tackle numbers for him, and they are a top 5 team in that regard. So Saints giving up 4th most tackles to the cornerback position. Now they did trade for what's his name, Roger McCreary this past week. McCreary, he's played mostly in the slot, but he could play on the outside as well. But also, this is going to be his first game with the team if he's even active. So I don't expect him to come in and kick Quentin Lake out of his cornerback spot or anything like that, or his starting role, or cut into his slot snaps, anything. So really just keeping an eye on it. I think he could play outside as well, but we'll see what happens there. But nothing to be concerned about for this week, at least. Rams linebackers, Nate the Great Landman has been, great. We continue to start him. He's been efficient in a zone-heavy defense, so no concerns for him in a neutral matchup this week. Omar Spates really remains just a deep league option. And then the Rams defensive lineman, Jared Verse, Byron Young, nobody's benching either guy at this point. You don't have to be told to start them. We'll see how rookie Tyler Shough handles this pass rush in his first NFL start. But my initial guess is that Verse and Young will be able to get after him and take him down just fine. All right, Kansas City, Buffalo. We're almost there. Kansas City's defensive line. Let's start there. Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, tougher matchup this week against the Bills. Their O-line has been really solid, and Josh Allen has typically been great at avoiding sacks, though he has been at least a little bit more susceptible lately, which has increased his pressure to sack conversion rate. So maybe Jones and Karlaftis can get after him a bit more. They're both fine starts either way, just more in that kind of DL2 range for Karlaftis, fringe DT1, DT2 range for Chris Jones. Linebackers for the Chiefs, Nick Bolton remains a fine start. He's cooled down here in recent weeks, but we did talk about that, week 7 anomaly game where he only played 26 snaps. Last week, he was fine. Nothing great. It happens. I'd still continue to start him every week. Drew Tranquil remains just a deeper league option. His snaps are fine. Just he's not a full-time player and he'll be more inconsistent. And then Chiefs defensive backs, Chamari Connor, the clear top option here. Now, we saw a little snap weirdness with Brian Cook this past week being taken off the field for several drives. He was replaced by either Christian Roland Wallace or Jaden Hicks. Now, Hicks ended up playing 74% of the snaps on Monday compared to just 57% for Cook. I didn't see anything injury-wise to say this was why the reason for that. So it did seem like an intentional rotation with Cook and Hicks and this Roland Wallace character. Now, Hicks, again, he ended up playing the most of the three. So we'll just kind of keep an eye to see how this shakes out. But I'm only trusting Chamari Connor from this group for now. And then, Jalen Watson, Trent McDuffie should be solid CB required options in a great matchup. Buffalo linebackers. Yeah, this was a lot of fun last week. Terrell Bernard, active and didn't play a single defensive snap, laying a complete goose egg in week 8. Really, really annoying shit. I hate this. It screwed me over as well. I'm sure plenty of you were screwed by this as well. It's going to obviously make us a little skittish here in trusting Terrell Bernard. I think the main thing to note is that this wasn't a benching as much as it was Bernard just being there in case of emergency, right? Because they were already without Matt Milano, who was injured, and Bernard was just banged up coming into this game. So I think they made him active because he could go just in case, like something were to happen to Shaq Thompson or Dorian Williams. And they had Joe Andreessen, but let's be honest. So I think the main thing, we'll kind of keep an eye out for the practice reports. Those are going to be crucial if we're going to trust Terrell Bernard again for IDP this week. We want to see at least one full practice on Thursday or Friday. That should signify whether he'll be good to go in his usual full-time role this week. And then Buffalo's defensive line, Joey Bosa, continues to play great here in Buffalo. He's been a resurgent season for him, still considered a solid starting option. Everything with him looks great. Playing time, pass rush metrics are all there for Joey Bosa right now. So it's not a great matchup, but again, he's one of the better options in IDP right now. And then Greg Rousseau had one of his better games last week after we kind of highlighted how this was a down year for him last week in terms of his underlying pass rush metrics and his production. So nice to see him kind of bounce back a little bit. Hopefully he can keep that going. Again, tougher matchup, but still a fringe starter for IDP at the moment. And then Buffalo's defensive backs, Teron Johnson gets a generally fine matchup. Well, not really. Yeah, Teron Johnson. Look, the Chiefs don't play a lot in 11 personnel, so I think the snap share overall for Johnson is going to come in a little bit lower, but also the Chiefs rank 27th in tackles per game to the cornerback position. So might be a week to wait on Teron Johnson or keep him on benches. And then safeties, Taylor Rapp is the guy that I'm thinking of, landed on injured reserve. Jordan Poyer, he filled in, but he only played 3/4 of the snap. So would obviously like to see that reach 100% before we're plugging him into IDP lineup. So for me at safety for Buffalo, it's mostly just Cole Bishop in a good matchup this week. Okay, Sunday Night Football. Let's start Seattle, Washington, linebackers here for the Seattle Seahawks. Ernest Jones, a nice option once again this week. Not much analysis needed there. Drake Thomas. Now, he hasn't been overly effective for IDP purposes, but he has seemingly phased out Tyrese Knight from that defense, which has allowed Thomas to play over 90% of snaps in each of the past 2 games. Like he's more of kind of this safe fill-in option for IDP managers if needed. And, with 4 teams on bye and injuries piling up, obviously Thomas can be valuable this week. It's at least a favorable matchup against the Commanders. They're giving up the 9th most tackles per game to the linebacker position. So I don't mind Drake Thomas as a fill-in this week. Seattle's defensive line. Solid group of gentlemen here. We've got 2 legit DT required options in Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams. And even the edges, DeMarcus Lawrence and Uchenna and Nwosu have been playing pretty well. So I don't mind them as potential streaming options if you need them. Seattle's defensive back. So Julian Love and Devin Witherspoon have missed the last few games, which opened up playing time for Ty Okada and Nick Emenwari to fill those roles. We've talked about this situation before and to monitor whether or not Love and Witherspoon would be active before trusting Okada and Emenwari again. Same thing this week, though it feels more likely that both of those guys are back this week. So if Love is good to go, obviously Okada won't be playable with Love back. And to be honest, I wouldn't play Emenwari either, just because he's been awesome in that nickel role, which happens to be Witherspoon's role as well. So I'll want to see how that usage shakes out. Maybe Spoon plays more outside now. That is very possible and would keep Emenwari on the field more. The main thing, though, is that we should see it before we trust it, because these guys haven't played together all season. So this really could be our first real chance to see how Mike McDonald and company plan to deploy the 2 of them. For Washington, the Commanders' safety situation has been a hot mess recently. Like, they've tried out multiple rotations at the position. It's led to inconsistent usage for Quan Martin and Jeremy Reeves, who were the starters on paper, at least, right? So in week 7, Quan Martin played just 60% of snaps. Reeves played 87%. And then in week 8, it was Martin who played 100% of snaps, while Reeves played 54%. So this was similar to even the week 6 usage as well. So it just becomes difficult to trust who to start at safety in Washington. And for now, like, Quan Martin, probably the best option, but I think IDP managers who are looking to chase his strong production last week should at least be aware that those snaps could disappear if this team is going to be as inconsistent as they have been at the position. Washington's defensive line, Jacob Martin had 2 sacks last week. That was nice to see someone step up there with Dorrance Armstrong out for the year. I don't think we'll be able to consistently count on that, really, just kind of, viewing him as like a volume dependent streaming option for the most part. This also isn't the best matchup where he'll get Charles Cross at left tackle and Sam Darnold, who has been excellent as far as pressure to sack conversion rate goes. And then Washington's linebackers, the Commanders' linebackers, they've been producing as expected heading into the year because of how they're deployed. I'm very glad that not a single person has come to me with what's wrong with Frankie Louvu questions. That means you all have been listening to the pod and in the offseason, so you know exactly what to expect from Frankie Louvu. Now, we did get a slight shift this past week among the team's linebackers because Louvu played even more on the edge this week than he has in previous weeks. He played 79% of his snaps on the edge, which could just have a lot to do with the team losing Dorrance Armstrong, and could be the case going forward. Then what they did was they backfilled his linebacker snaps with Jordan Titz McGee, who played 84% of snaps this past week, primarily at off-ball linebacker alongside Bobby Wagner. So we'll see if the Commanders, how they felt about that deployment and whether that is something that they feel is worth sticking with this week before maybe we trust Jordan McGee in deeper leagues. But he could at least be worth a speculative ad right now. And then Louvu, it's going to, maybe if that makes him more of a full-time move to the edge, probably less reliable for IDP, even more sack dependent than he already was. So, that'll definitely be something to keep an eye on in Sunday Night Football. Okay, final game of the week, Monday Night Football, Arizona Cardinals, Dallas Cowboys. Let's start with Arizona's linebackers. Neutral matchup here for Mac Wilson, Akeem Davis-Gaither. Davis-Gaither did get a healthier snap share in week 7, the last time that we saw the Cardinals play. He played 88% of snaps. Again, that's fluctuated quite a bit this year, so it could change, but he'll remain just kind of a deeper league option for now. And then Mac Wilson is right in there as a usable every down linebacker once again. Arizona's defensive line, Josh Sweat really remains the only one that I want to trust for IDP. The Dallas offensive line has not been good, but Dak has done a nice job at not taking sacks at least. Sweat actually played a season high 66% snap share in week 7. So hopefully they'll keep him at least around that mark, if not higher, because he's been hovering around 50-ish% each week. And that's just not going to be good enough, right? So if it's around 66% or higher, that's a lot more usable for Josh Sweat for IDP. DBs for Arizona. I think heading into week 7, we talked about Budda Baker and just kind of continuing to be fine with him as a weekly starter, just as long as we understand how volatile and how much of a shit show the DB position can be, right? Like, and he had a perfectly fine game last time we saw him, 8 total tackles. That's rock solid for a DB. Him and Jalen Thompson really remain perfectly fine weekly starting options with good upside. Also, nice week to potentially take a shot on the Arizona cornerbacks. Dallas is giving up the most tackles to the position. So Max Melton and the rookie Will Johnson are the full-time starters there if you're looking at that. Dallas's linebackers, let's start with them for this team. Kenneth Murray, his days have to be numbered. It is shocking how bad this guy actually is. I mean, DeMarvion Overshown can't get to full health soon enough. I'm sure if you're a Cowboys fan or an IDP manager of Overshown, you are done with Kenneth Murray. Murray is terrible. We'll get a nice primetime game to see that in person this week. Shamar James remains the better option as far as I'm concerned for IDP. I know neither guy really did much for IDP last week, but still trusting James over Murray more often than not in a good matchup. And then at least until DeMarvion Overshown comes back. Dallas's defensive backs, they are all banged up at this point, it seems. Maybe Donovan Wilson is back. Marquise Bell is probably getting another start at safety regardless. Neither one is really all that interesting for IDP. So Deron Bland is really kind of the best option in my opinion. He gets the full-time slot role, plays every down. So Bland is the only one that I'll kind of take a shot on this week. And then lastly, Dallas's defensive line. All right, that's it for this week. No, wait, I'll hold on. I'll give a shout out to Donovan Ezeraku. He's been the lone Cowboys defensive line that we've had hope for this year with Micah Parsons gone. He did get his first sack of the season, and he's actually playing really well lately. Over the last 3 games, I know it's a small sample. He ranks 6th in PFF pass rush grade with an 89.2. So the playing time is definitely there. It's not we're not necessarily starting him just yet, but definitely encouraging stuff here, at least in recent weeks from Ezeraku. So there you go. Some hope for the you Cowboys fans out there. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. That is going to do it. Again, another long one this week, even with the teams on a bye. I'm sorry that I continued to ramble. Hopefully you guys found some of that information helpful. So if you did, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means a ton to me and it helps me out a lot. You can also check out all of my work over at pff.com with a PFF Plus subscription, including the IDP fantasy report, IDP rankings, wide receiver man zone coverage report, the red zone report, all that fun stuff. And be sure to use the promo code PFF Fantasy Podcast 25 for 25% off. As always, feel free to ask questions in the comment section. I will do my best to answer them all. Good luck this week. And until next time, peace out.